Betmaker Show. This is the NFL Week 1 odds analysis and preview for Friday, May 8th, 2020. And now, live from Las Vegas, the host of the Betmaker Show, Brian Blessy.
Always a good time to talk about the NFL and a great day to do it the day after the schedule was released. We knew who teams were going to play. Now we know when. We've actually got week 1 NFL lines. We got a lot of cool things to talk about. Brian Blessing and Bruce Marshall were in Las Vegas. Bruce from the legendary publication The Gold Sheet. All right, Bruce, we know where we stand now in terms of a schedule. The question is, maybe as a starting point, tough to throw, the responsibility of an answer on your shoulders, but does this go off as planned? Yeah, see, there's the loaded question for sports talk radio that you've ever had.
Well, there you go. I will say first, bravo to the NFL for actually releasing the schedule. And they've kept on course with everything here. And I think people just need to see that. I think it will, although it could have some dips and turns in the road here, and we'll see about fans in the stands. And some states are different than others. But I think at a worst case scenario, they could play with nobody in the stadium. That's 4 months down the road now, so lots of things can change. But I think the schedule looks like it's sort of preparing for that. The only possibilities would be if a couple of these places might not even let players together on the field. As if it were today, they wouldn't even let them play in an empty stadium, some of these places. But there's near enough places that would. So if they had to find an emergency venue for some of the teams in California or wherever, I think they could elsewhere. But unlike the other sports, which have rattled their sabers a little bit and talked about, floated some different dates and things like that, but nothing really concrete has come out yet. The NFL has stepped up and has come up with something concrete here, and that's very, very encouraging.
Well, the one thing to a degree they have is the luxury of time, albeit the older we get, we know how fast time goes. 4 months goes by pretty quickly in terms of staging these games in all the respective cities. Then what is the premise in terms of fans in the stands? But if we're starting to see many states slowly start to reopen now, we're in the midst of a very important couple of weeks, regardless of what ultimately is going to be the deciding factor that, this thing has been everywhere and we've got to move forward. Or if with some of the states reopening, you'd almost think it's likely that numbers will go back up in a few weeks. And then the question is, does it warrant, or would it be panic again? Do we boomerang back where things start closing? Because the next 2 weeks are just huge in this regard. And, again, whether you're whatever side of this you're on, I'm of this common sense belief that there's got to be a middle ground. We've yet to get there on that. But the next 2 weeks are actually very important when we talk about the landscape for sports.
Yeah, it is. And it's a lot of unknowns, like you said, and we've got several months to go. The only certainty I have right now is that I don't want to get Earl Thomas's wife mad at me after she pulled a gun on him and pointed it at his head. But other than that, it's all up in the air. I think there is one other thing to keep in mind, though. The NFL has some flexibility with this. If they had to push stuff back, they could. There's one other interesting development now, stadium-wise, for the NFL. This year will be the first time ever in the history of pro football where you don't have a stadium share with no stadium share with an MLB team. And that's been declining in recent years anyway, but now the Raiders are out of Oakland. There isn't one NFL team that shares a stadium with a Major League Baseball team now. So scheduling-wise, they've got some flexibility here. If they did have to push it back a couple of weeks, they could. But I don't think they're planning on that. I really think they're thinking they can get this thing going, and there's enough encouraging signs out there that they can. In most places, there's going to be some states holding out, but it's tough to talk about this stuff here on May 8, May 9 this weekend. And we're talking about, we still got June, July, August, September. And although it seems in interminable amount of time we've been in this thing, 4 months, it goes quick, but it's still, it was a long time ago, 4 months ago. I was right around New Year's. So a lot's happened in 4 months, and a lot could happen in the next 4 months. So we'll just have to hang on and see. But at least bravo to the NFL for putting this schedule out there and getting people at least excited about it.
And just as a point of following up, I just let you finish the train of thought, but I do listen. As far as Earl Thomas is concerned, some people have found other ways to occupy their time during this little pause, if we want to call it that. And you mentioned the Raiders. The one thing is actually, it's kind of bizarre that 4 of their home games at the new stadium, Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, are primetime night games. And we know these players are creatures of habit. In the night games, and specifically the Thursday night games and the short week, can mess teams up. It's something we always take into account when we're handicapping games. The fact that they're playing 4 of their 8 home games at night, it's actually, does it give them a chance to get into a little rhythm and a routine for it?
I don't know. That's a good question, Brian. I guess we'll have to see. I know one thing here for the Raiders, the NFL thing for Vegas, and we saw this with the Golden Knights in the NHL, especially that first year in the whole Vegas flu thing. And there were teams that would stay in here for several nights before, if the schedule broke a certain way, they could. The NFL, they won't do that. They're going to be in and out of here real quick. So at least that aspect of Vegas won't. I don't think it'll impact the visiting teams like it maybe did in the NHL. But yeah, it is a little bit interesting there that they're going to be they've got them in 4 primetime games. It's odd because oftentimes the schedules, they run a risk every year with the schedules, just in the teams that they schedule and who they've got featured, especially some of these later season games. Some of these teams end up not being as good as they thought, and you get some poor matchups later in the year. So there's some pressure on the Raiders from the network perspective to actually be decent this year because but I think in the overarching, they just think just any game in Vegas this year is going to be kind of a big deal because of the venue. So that's going to be something in the back. And even if the Raiders aren't that good, people are still going to be.
The funny thing is, it's a very small sample size, it being me. But it's funny, we always said this when the Golden Knights came into the league as an expansion team, that part of the can't miss opportunity for it would be, boy, the visiting cities, when they get the schedule, the first thing they're going to do is, when is our team, especially the Eastern teams, when are they going to Vegas? Everybody goes to the schedule. Everybody looks at their work schedule and plot a 4-day trip to Vegas to come see their team play. Well, we're only 24 hours out of the same thing having happened here with the Raiders. And the Raiders are another unique kind of animal because I've long been of the belief here that, for starters, 60% of quote-unquote Raider fans that would be at these games would be people coming in from California. I really am on the fence in terms of, I don't want the Raiders here. I don't know that people are going to go ballistic that the Raiders are here. Maybe over the course of time that will change. But the schedule comes out, Bruce. My phone's lighting up like a Christmas tree. People I know, people I don't know on social media who know I'm here, know my Buffalo roots. People, when are single season tickets going on sale? When's this? When's that? It's amazing. The Bills game's like in October, and everybody. I personally, my phone's ringing like I got something to say in the matter. But that's the premise with this, and we know Jerry's World is such a big stadium that so many visiting fans end up going to those games. I think the Raiders deal could be kind of the same thing.
I think you might be right, Brian, and me too. I mean, I got, as soon as the schedule show last night, I had my friends from Baton Rouge. I did the radio show. They said we're coming for the Saints game, that Monday night game, the second one.
There you go.
So they're already making their plans. First First of all, let's hope there's enough hotel space open, but that's another question. But I think as far as the stadium atmosphere, that thing that you mentioned, that's a pretty good point. Because this Las Vegas is a city of mostly of transplants. And let's face it, the Raiders are coming here from somewhere else too. The Raiders haven't played here. They played a preseason game here in 1964 against the Oilers. As far as I know, that's the only game that they've ever played here. So, or the only pro football game ever played here. So, I don't know about the local, a strong base of Raider fans, locally here, even not to mention the out of town fans. So, I have a feeling the atmosphere is going to be, if not quite Charger-like the last few years, as it has been for the Chargers. And that's another question with their big stadium. We can get to that in a second too, with their new big one in LA. But the Raiders are going to that could certainly be a dynamic. It'll be a different atmosphere, I think, than they had up in Oakland, which was a pretty good home field for many years. I will say this, though. I might have mentioned to you last week we did take a ride over to St. George, Utah, so I could get a haircut. And they had some stores open there. And usually that's sort of a Broncos store, Broncos area. And a few of the stores, all of a sudden now they've got Raiders stuff there instead of Broncos stuff. So they're trying to get a footprint in the region. So for whatever that's worth, the Raiders are trying to expand their wings here in their new home.
Yeah, the funny thing is, I didn't have the heart to tell these people the timing is everything in life, and it was the only conflict of a major event for the Raiders home games. And believe me, they said the NFL was cognizant of that, trying not to stage major events or have a Raiders game wrapped around major events in the city. That Bills game is the week that they rescheduled what do they call it? The electronic Daisy thing.
Oh, that thing at the racetrack. Yeah.
The Electric Daisy Carnival, the EDC. But what they said was, for that specific weekend with a home football game in concert with that the room rates will be through the roof. so yeah. Hey, congrats! You get to come to Vegas, but you'll go broke doing it.
Well, Brian, I know the only thing that would keep you from the Electric Daisy Carnival would be the Bills playing here in Vegas. So there you go.
Bruce, I will be watching that Bills-Raiders game with you at Sunset Station.
There you go. By the way, one other thing, Raider fans by name, they wear masks anyway. So, well, I think they've got if they're still COVID stuff, the Raiders fans are going to be pretty well fixed up for
they were stocked up for this for 3 decades.
Yes.
The one thing, just to maybe dive in a little bit, we got week 1 NFL lines. Maybe just dive into some of these it'd be fun to actually talk about some of this stuff. We start with KC on the Thursday night game, and the Super Bowl champs, get their night in the sun, which has normally been the case. Last year was different. They were celebrating the 100 years of the NFL, so they did the big rivalry game with the Packers and the Bears. But the Chiefs 9.5 at Arrowhead, hosting Houston. Total on the game is 54, which is a playoff rematch.
Yeah, and remember, Houston also beat KC in the regular season last year, too, at Arrowhead, so they've got a lot of experience playing up there. New look Texans here with however they're going to look this year. But I got to go back and check. Now, I'm not going to start handicapping all the stuff for a good while. But just offhand, it seems like these opening games on Thursday nights, it hasn't been much of an advantage for the home team in recent years, I don't believe. And the numbers tend to get a little inflated. And it's always the champion side or a top contending side. Last year, the Patriots, I think, begged out of that first Thursday, and it was the Bears.
It's a ring ceremony and all the stuff that goes with it.
There you go. And it doesn't – they seem to be overvalued at the home teams in those first games. So that first blush, I would think Houston's kind of interesting there. Remember, Houston did have a 24-0 lead on the Chiefs in the playoffs before things went pear-shaped on them. But that jumped out first. They got the total up there in the mid-50s. The regular season game went 55, and then they went, 82 in the playoffs last year. So we'll see. Generally, though, I mean, the totals all seem rather mid to high 40s in most of them, which seems a tad high. I think unders have been a pretty decent play recently. Again, I got to double-check this again, but in recent first weeks, unders as well. But
I would look at the under 54. Yeah. In this game specifically, we know what the Chiefs are capable of doing here.
Yeah.
But Houston, life without DeAndre Hopkins, and is David Johnson healthy? Are they switching things around that they're more of a run-based thing, which would not be a bad idea, Bruce? And this is the fun thing to start talking football again, is Deshaun Watson, honestly, it's like Darwin's theory of evolution here, survival of the fittest. This poor kid, he's been a crash test dummy for 3 years here. I mean, they got to get a running game.
Yeah, they do. And if David Johnson can be the old David Johnson, that would maybe help them. The Texans are kind of interesting here. I mean, Brandon Cooks, that's not an insignificant addition. Maybe it's not quite Hopkins, but if the Hopkins thing had become so polluted with Bill O'Brien, maybe it's best that he's out of there. Not just Cooks, but if they can keep Will Fuller healthy, that's the field stretcher that Watson needs, and he's been very effective when he's been healthy in the past. Kenny Stills also is there. Remember, he had been pretty productive for the Dolphins. He came in. They also added Randall Cobb as another threat. So I think they've got enough targets. So you're right, David Johnson if he can get back, Houston might not fall off the map all that much. Can they get J.J. Watt healthy? This is a team that is recent years has had several, mounting injury woes each year. Watt has certainly been one of them. But you figure in week one, so I got to check back how the Texans have fared in week one. But before they all start getting hurt, Texans might be kind of an interesting side here early in the season.
All right, good stuff. It's fun to just start diving in. I got one for you. I got a home run for you. I'll get to that in a second. But Miami and the Patriots, again, the intrigue here. Patriots laying 7 total in the game is 44. AFC East game. Let's see what happens with the Patriots. Cam Newton's still out there. Is it the Stidham kid? It's still Belichick. I think they find ways to be very effective, but I don't know if I'm laying 7 against the Dolphins team that I thought played their heart out last year and were more than competitive. That number actually looks a little high to me.
Yeah, it does to me too. I mean, especially since we're projecting the Patriots 8, 9 wins this year, whatever, most of the projections. And who knows if they'll be that good. I know this was an offense that was broken last year, even with Brady. The offense was broke last year. And now you take Brady out and you put Stidham in. I'm leery, but the Belichick thing is there. Let me say this. I'm neutral on the Patriots right now. And I've had some guys come out and tell me they think the Patriots are going to be a great bet this year. They're going to be undervalued, blah, blah, blah. Possibly. But I need to wait and see a little bit. I mean, they lost at home to Miami last year right at the end of the season, and that cost them the bye in the first round and ended up paving their way out of the playoffs. Miami has historically played pretty tough against New England, especially games down in Miami. This one happens to be up in Foxborough. And Brian Flores, of course, an ex-Belichick guy who fared, better than most people thought his last year. So, yeah, to answer your question, I think that 7 at first blush looks a little too high.
Betmaker, let's make some money tonight.
For outstanding information and special offerings and promotions, we invite you and encourage you to sign up for our newsletter today simply by going to the website at betmaker.com. All right, again, we can go through some of these quickly. It's just fun to dive into it again. But I think right out of the gate, best bet maybe of week one, and I'm sitting here staring at this, is Baltimore laying 10 against Cleveland. The total in the game is 48. Let me just tell you something. What do we know and what do we say every year in the preseason? Harbaugh, the Ravens, like to win preseason games. Well, that has actually translated into success and momentum they carry into the opener. Last 4 years, 2016, they win the home opener against the Bills 13-7, nothing to write home about there. But then they shut out the Bengals on the road 20-0 in 2017. 2018, they beat the Bills 47-3. And then last year in the opener, they beat the Dolphins on the road 59-10. Okay? The Ravens week one, that number should be 13.
Yeah, I know. I'm actually more hoping that they keep playing the preseason with the Ravens. That's my favorite go-to thing every year that they play. So let's hope that they play in the preseason. But yeah, that's definitely true. Interesting. Cleveland, by the way, was one of the two teams that beat the Ravens, though, in the regular season last year, and they beat them in Baltimore. So just keep that in mind. But no, you're right. I'm always pro Harbaugh here. Another new coach in Cleveland, but it seems like we've been saying that every year for the last decade almost, doesn't it, Brian?
A rematch of week 1 last year. Bills came back in a game against the Jets to beat them, and that was a game that had Sam Darnold in it before I think he got mononucleosis, if I'm not mistaken, the very next week. But a lot of expectations for the Bills, and the Bills, they were actually a road warrior last year, which might have snuck up on a lot of people. They were 6-2 on the road last year. This is a division game. Bills Jets totals 40. Points could be real hard to come by in this game.
Yeah, you mentioned the total, Brian, and from these early numbers from a bookmaker, that 40 is the lowest total right now on the board in week 1. So that's interesting there. The Jets and Bills opened last year in the Meadowlands last year, and that was sort of the springboard game for the Bills, and it sort of got the Jets on the wrong foot and had them spinning out of control for the first half of the season before they picked it up a little bit late, and then Darnold had the problem a little bit earlier. Very interesting. They're all interesting in the first week. I think the fact this is the lowest total is another intriguing thing about it. And I just remember, whenever I see the Jets right now, I think about that great Curb Your Enthusiasm episode they had from the most recent season where the Jets
killed the guy,
killed himself because he was so frustrated.
and then the wife goes, "It wasn't that. It was this." At the end, the wife, who supposedly didn't care less, she cited a different reason in the same game.
Yes,
this is why the guy killed himself.
Yes, very good.
We won't go through them all, but I would just go down to some of the more intriguing ones. Green Bay and Minnesota. Interesting to me. 3.5 Vikings, total 46.5. And we'll find out about the Aaron Rodgers soap opera here a little bit throughout the summer months. And I think there's a Vikings team now that is just hell-bent on running the ball down teams' throats.
Yeah, that is interesting, and that Minnesota would be favored here. It's kind of interesting. Green Bay did go in there and win last year late in the season in a big game for the Packers. So that intrigues that Green Bay's 3.5. Something tells me that number is going to move down a little bit. I'm intrigued a bit about the Cardinals and the Niners. Arizona is one of these teams you watch. Sometimes the Super Bowl losers like the 49ers have a little bit of trouble early on. Arizona played the Niners really tough last year, kept them within 3 in that game, the Thursday nighter down in Phoenix on Halloween, I think it might have been. And then late in the season, listen, that score, I think it ends up Niners won by 10, but that was one of those where they scored the last 14 points in like the last 6 seconds. And the last touchdown was one of those, laterals going awry on the kickoff. They had all sorts of trouble with the Cardinals last year.
I'll tell you one thing, Bruce.
Yeah.
It's funny. First blush, I just looked at it and I'm like, that total low. 46, and so I quickly went back to. I'm going from memory, and I think Arizona's going to be much more prolific offensively. Murray with a year under his belt, but the 2 games last year, 28-25 and 36-26.
Yeah,
that game kind of has track meet written all over it to me.
Yeah, and there's the fact there are several games with higher totals than that one, including Dallas and the Rams, Pittsburgh and the Giants have a higher total than that. Cardinals, Niners, I think that might look a little low too. Also, now of these rookie quarterbacks, the only one we're pretty sure is going to start right off the bat is Cincy with Burrow, because I'm not sure about Tua or Herbert or anybody else starting right off the bat. Herbert, Chargers, they're counting on Tyrod Taylor being the guy right now. Chargers with their great new uniforms, by the way. 3.5 point favorite early at Cincinnati. Rookie quarterbacks, I always go back to 1971 when Jim Plunkett and Archie Manning came in their first games that year, scored major upsets. Patriots beat the Raiders in Foxborough, which was the first regular season game at what they called Schaefer Stadium then. And Archie Manning's, you could say this might have been the highlight of his NFL career, last play win over the Rams, very dramatic down at Old Tulane Stadium. But rookie quarterbacks often don't step in with a bang. They did in 1971, but rookie quarterbacks usually their first games. It's a tough road to hoe there. So that's sort of an interesting game. And I think in that game, it's going to be Burrow starting, not Herbert for the Chargers.
I'll tell you one I'm looking at, Bruce, just from everybody wants to get off to a good start, and, everybody's 0-0 and everybody's got a bounce in their step. But from a sense of urgency, the Rams catching 2.5 at home in their opener against the Cowboys. The total there is 48.5. Man, if I'm the Rams, I'm not saying, all your eggs are in a basket, but you better be winning that one, because then in back-to-back weeks, they travel to Philly. Then they've got to travel to Buffalo. They better get a W here. And honestly, that would be one thing I would watch. And especially with travel concerns, it would be a smart move. Although, from a safety element, what would make sense in our former world to what makes sense today, who knows? But it probably would have been a good idea for the Rams in week 2 to go play the Eagles and then hunker down somewhere there in the East Coast, practice, and go to Buffalo. You don't want to be flying back and forth cross country back-to-back weeks. And the way travel is going to be a thing now, that's a pretty complex start to a season for the Rams.
Yeah, it is. And by the way, though, isn't it great to be talking about games? I mean,
I know.
It really is. It was really good.
It seems like forever ago. Hey, but at least we remember the things that we think about.
Yeah, all of a sudden it all comes back to us. Brian, you mentioned the Rams here, though, and now it didn't get as much publicity as the Chargers the last couple of years because it wasn't quite as pronounced as with the Chargers. And we touched upon this with the Raiders a few moments ago, and we're talking about that opener with the Saints and the other games and the Bills and all coming in. There were also a ton of visiting fans at Ram games in recent years too. And there were many games in which it was hard to tell they were the home team. But that was the case. They were gone from LA too long, and their fan base, which has started to come back, it's not there yet. They are now into a big new stadium. This is going to be their first regular season game at that big thing that looks like a spaceship that landed at the old Hollywood Park site. So you've got that as well. You got the Rams ready for a new stadium, and that's going to be another sort of a destination thing too for these fans. Now there's Cowboys fans everywhere, and they usually will split a crowd with the Rams anyway in LA. Now the big new stadium there and all this stuff. The Rams getting used to new digs and their home field edge was certain, not as much as it could have been in recent years. I'm not sure, the same things we're talking about the Raiders here in Vegas, it's going to apply to the Rams too in LA. It's certainly going to apply to the Chargers, who are going to be outnumbered even more when they start playing in this new big stadium. But that's something to think about the Rams as well. And then the other thing, Bruce, is the regular season win totals. Yep.
I think now you really, you could have formed an opinion on who's playing who. You didn't know where, when, but I think people start to revisit this again in terms of the schedule. And I'm sure, and I will get your take on the Broncos and what you thought of their schedule. But the Bills last year, their season win total was 6.5, and I follow them very closely. I'm like, what are people not seeing here? That defense is really good. They opened them up 8.5, and Brady leaves, and they're at 9. I mean, the Bills to me look like an injury here. That's the thing, injuries. But they look like, to me, an 11-win team at the least. And then the Broncos, they're at 7.5, and boy, the weapons they gave them. And there's all these questions, and the question mark is Locke. But if you look at the goodies they gave him, Denver is actually an intriguing team that, and I understand the total at 7.5, but they're intriguing to me to maybe make a little noise this year.
They might be, yeah, and I agree with you. Buffalo should be favored in the East. This is my year. I mean, Josh Allen, I've been beating his drum since he was at Wyoming, so here's his chance this year. He's got to step up.
And he's got weapons now.
And the same thing sort of applies in Denver, though I am not quite as confident about Drew Lock. I do shows in Denver, with me and the Broncos all these years. I think this team is set up to have a chance, but John Elway, again, is rolling the dice at quarterback with Locke, who's had, now there was some success he had late last season. The Broncos, there's only one of those last 5 games. They won 4 of them. That game at Houston, they played very well. every other game they could have lost, and then they played the Raiders were reeling, the Chargers were reeling, the Lions were reeling. They could have easily been 1-4 in those last 5. So I'm not quite as sold on Locke. I'm also not sold. He went out and picked up Jeff Driscoll as the backup. Driscoll has had limited experience. He's been forced in Cincy and Detroit the last 2 years to start 8 games. He only won 1 of them. I think I dare say they're a little light at quarterback again, and he is role. This is a situation that cried out for a veteran backup to come in. Actually, they would have been better off bringing Case Keenum back as the backup, I thought, this year, especially since Locke missed a lot of last year because he was hurt with the thumb injury. But again, that's the whole question there with Locke. At least in Buffalo, we know Josh Allen can take the team to the playoffs. In Denver, we don't know that yet about Locke. So they've got, again, John Elway has set it up. I mean, he hasn't gotten the quarterback thing right since he brought Peyton Manning in. And that's the question again here, because I think the rest of this roster is looking pretty interesting here. A new offensive coordinator, by the way, is Pat Shurmur. So they made a change there. So you've got an experienced NFL play caller there. So I think that should be a plus. But is Locke or Driscoll the combo you really want at quarterback? I don't know.
The interesting thing to me, and understandably so, you get the inflated, you get a juicy season win total on the Chiefs. And if you were going to compare them, I think Baltimore's got a stone in their shoe if at 11.5, I think if Lamar Jackson stays healthy, they had an incredible regular season. I think that's a team probably motivated with a chip on their shoulder. And I'm not knocking the Chiefs at all, but them at 11.5, potential Super Bowl hangover. And oh, by the way, there's just something about every team, when it's on their calendar. Hey, the Super Bowl champs are coming in. They get everybody's best shot. It's funny. I can't see the Ravens not going over the total. And I look at the Chiefs and go, there's tons of talent there. But it's still games, when you're playing shootout games, sometimes I think there could be chinks in the armor. I think the Chiefs might shock people. I think they get 10, 11 wins for fun. I just don't think they're a sure shot to go over 11.5.
Yeah, anytime I see 11.5 anybody, I'm just reluctant to go over. I'm just not sure how much value there is in that. There's too many things that can go wrong. You can still have a really good season, 11-5, and get in the playoffs. And then but at the under cash is there. Keep in mind, last year, the it team heading into the playoffs last year was Baltimore. Baltimore had the home field in the AFC. Baltimore would have been favored over the Chiefs in the AFC title game had they had met. Tennessee got in the way there and messed things up for Baltimore. But that was the it team last year. Up until right at the end of the playoffs, that's when the Chiefs became the it team. And now everybody's talking about the Chiefs. They forgot about the Ravens a little bit. I don't know. The Ravens still might be the team to me. I like some of the things, again, they did in the offseason. So they are going to meet in the regular season. I think it's week 3. I think they're going to meet. Now the Chiefs did beat the Ravens early last season, right at the start of last season when Jackson had they lost those couple games in September, Browns and Chiefs, but those are the only games that they lost. So, yeah, you're right about the Chiefs maybe being overvalued, and maybe Baltimore is still the team in the AFC.
The funny thing is I'm just scrolling through it. The schedule, at least on paper, which is always a slippery slope to walk because, months out you look, the schedule looks easy, and so many times it just kind of flip-flops around. But the one I'd be very wary of, could they shock you? Sure. But the Chargers season win total at 8. The reason I look at it, Bruce, the Tyrod Taylor thing, he can win you some games. I don't think he can, bring you back with regularity, and trust him to, have the drive at the end of the game. But the thing to me is it's exactly the same scenario that was in play when he was in Cleveland. And he's serviceable, but he's going to be playing literally, looking over his shoulder. And then it's like the clock is ticking. Okay, at what point do they say, okay, this has been fine. He's nice to have, but we drafted a quarterback. At what point do we get him in? So you're handicapping them, and if they lose 2 games in a row, the cry is going to be out there to get the rookie quarterback in there. I'd be looking under 8 for the Chargers.
I would too, and I see some guys projecting the Chargers to 9 or 10 wins. I don't see it.
I don't see it. And Gordon's gone, and
Lynn is under the gun. And let's not again circle back to what we said about a moment ago. The new stadium, they don't have a home field. They really don't. They got to demonstrate. They didn't have one in Carson when they played at the MLS stadium. It was all the visiting fans. Their record at home was poor, especially point spread record. Now they're into a stadium that's 2-3 times bigger, and it's going to be more full with visiting fans. They don't have a home field.
Well, the Jets will pack the place.
They
catch a break. Yeah, well, you're right. Anybody can say, let's go to L.A. Are the Panthers and the Jags? I don't know so much about that, but the Jets will pack the joint. Raiders fans will take the joint over. I mean, that's a home game for the Raiders. There's no getting around that. Patriots fans will be there.
Sure. I mean, the Chiefs fans come. The Chiefs outmanned them last year. About the only two I could see are the Jags, and maybe the Panthers. But the Chargers don't have any of their own fans there. So I mean, it's not. They haven't had much of a home at all. And also listen. Anthony Lynn is on some thin ice here. That thing fell apart last year. There were some reasons. They had some injuries, but you can't have 2 seasons like that in a row for a team that was expecting to win. And I think he's generally done a good job, but he's kind of under the gun this year. So this was also the last place team in the AFC West last year. People forget that, but the Chargers, and they don't have their leader for the last 16 years. I mean, Rivers is gone.
Hey, listen, Bruce, I mean, we just scratched the surface here. It's tip of the iceberg. Tons of stuff to talk about now. I mean, we've gone the last 2.5 months. Thankfully, we had the NFL draft, got us through. But now we're sitting here staring at games, numbers, schedules. Thankfully, my friend, we're going to have lots to talk about here in the weeks to come.
Yeah, it's all of a sudden it came back to us, Brian. It's like, whoa, there it is. We're shocked back in the old reality from last fall. And there's so let's just keep hoping they can have these they'll keep going and they'll play. And for me, I hope they play preseason because I'm the preseason. I love preseason more than anything. So let's hope they play that as well. But we still got 3 months before that starts.
I hope you folks, hope you liked it. I'll tell you one thing. I mean, just, hashing this out is what I love about doing stuff like this. I'm sitting here just in this conversation, making notes. I mean, there are like 4 or 5 plays I love. A couple of games, some season win totals, just based on the information we got last night. So it's fun to start applying the things that we've been accustomed to doing. If the world's looking for a sense of normalcy, you and I, Bruce, at least today, have a glimpse into the future that maybe there is hope.
Yeah, I mean, as normal as you and me are, which is not too normal. I mean,
I know.
It's good. I can't watch Curb Your Enthusiasm replays forever. So I'm ready for something.
I'm on episode 21 of season 2 of 30 Rock with 5 more seasons to go after that. Yeah, no, I'm here. I'm with you. But good stuff. Bruce Marshall for the legendary publication, The Gold Sheet. I'm Brian Blessing. We're in Las Vegas and we're drooling for live sports, and the NFL gives us a little opportunity to look forward to that.
Let's make some money tonight.
Well, that's the Betmaker Show for now. We publish multiple times each week. We'd like to thank you for listening, and if you liked what you heard, please take a moment to leave a rating and review, or subscribe to our show feed, or share our show with a friend or two and help us grow the show. We very much appreciate it. Visit us on the web at betmaker.com, and reminder to sign up for the newsletter. Thanks to our engineer, Darren Vandermolen, and producer, Mike Gallivan. The Betmaker Show is a production of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated. Betmaker is a registered trademark. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this content without the express written consent of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated is strictly prohibited.
The handicapping and sports odds information contained on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Please confirm the wagering regulations in your jurisdiction as they vary from state to state, province to province, and country to country. Using this information to contravene any law or statute is prohibited. The podcast is not associated with, nor is it endorsed by any professional or collegiate league, association, or team. This podcast does not target and is not intended for an audience under the age of 18. If you think that you have a gambling addiction, stop this podcast now and please seek help.
Gambling and betting on sports is a form of entertainment and should be about having a good time. But when done excessively, it may negatively affect other areas of a person's life, such as their physical and mental health, school or work performance, finances, and or interpersonal relationships. At Betmaker.com and the Betmaker Show, we're concerned about the addiction that gambling may cause, and for this reason, we encourage everyone to practice responsible gambling. An approach to gambling that helps you ensure that it remains an enjoyable activity. Here are the main principles of responsible gambling. Don't think of gambling as a way to make money. Always gamble with money that you can afford to lose. Set limits and stick to them. Never chase losses. Don't gamble when you're depressed or upset, and create a healthy balance. Always be aware of how much time you spend gambling or thinking about gambling. And do not allow gambling to cause you to miss out on time with family and friends or time spent on other activities you enjoy. By following these guidelines, gambling can be a good time and great entertainment. If you feel at any time that your gambling is taking away from important areas of your life, is causing you stress or depression, or is leading to financial losses that are beyond your control, please reach out for help. Learn more at responsiblegambling.org.